so many China co-production films that you have, I'm sure you work with a large amount of Chinese actors, right? And we see a trend of Chinese actors signing with American agency management and coming to Hollywood to be in the big Hollywood films. What do you think? What's your thought about this?
I think it's great. I think that there's a certain amount of discipline that has come into the representation world in the United States that doesn't exist outside of the United States. And I found it very difficult to navigate actors' representation and those relationships internationally. That's not just China, that's France, that's Germany, that's other places. So I think when you have these actors being represented in the United States, it helps. It's almost as though they have a translator for the marketplace or for the industry, because it's a very specific kind of set of rules of how you engage and how the protocol of how a deal is done. And for example, when we were working with Li Bingbing, she's represented by the UTA, a big agency in town, and that negotiation was simplified because I was able to deal with agents here in Los Angeles that are able to engage with me, and then can go and engage directly with her Chinese representatives and with her directly, and then come back and it worked out very, very well. So I think the more collaboration that talent can have with U.S. representatives, I think is beneficial, because I think it helps filmmakers, it helps producers, it helps studios kind of navigate what is an otherwise very, very tricky marketplace in China.
People like Li Bingbing, Angelababy, Feng Xiaogang, they just not Li Bingbing, but Angelababy, Feng Xiaogang, they're big names in China. They just signed big company, big agency in the States, I think this year. And there's this saying in China that a lot of the Chinese superstars are trying to make it in the Hollywood and to be mainstream actors in Hollywood. Do you think it's possible? And what do you think are some barriers or challenges for Chinese actors in the state if they want to make it mainstream?
I think I don't know that they're different from other challenges, but I think the market here and it's to say what are the challenges, I think there's a million different challenges, but I think it's very, very beneficial for them to have representation, good representation in the States, because it allows them to work with the best people and allows an agent to filter and cut through all of the clutter of what's in the industry, you know, of projects that may or may not be beneficial for them. So I think it's a very good thing, and I think it's a great thing for Chinese actors to want to be put on the world stage. It's the most important territory, as everyone has their sights on China and how to access China. So you're seeing Donnie Yen pop up in Star Wars. You're seeing, you know, Li Bingbing was in Transformers. I mean, it is a very common thing now, and I think you're going to see more and more of that, of Chinese actors being integrated into Hollywood, tentpole Hollywood films, and there's no reason they can't be, you know, they can't be starring in these films and leading them, and we've shown that with films like, you know, like Nest, which is, you know, it's Li Bingbing is the star of this movie.
And do you see Nest will become, so you aim Nest into the Chinese market, or is it both US market, Australia market, Chinese market?
It's for the world market. I think that we definitely have a view on China. It's a big part of how this movie was put together, and I think you see that more and more now, where you have you see that more and more where that's it's a main part of the strategy.
You are an experienced, successful producer right now, but how did you first get into the film industry?
Well, I got in. I have a pretty traditional kind of route of how I got in. I went to film school, studied film in the Midwest, went to the University of Kansas, which is a big school in the Midwest, and started making films. Started making films there, and started making short films even when I was in high school before that, and then moved to Los Angeles and got my foot in the door in physical production, working on sets. And I fell in with a German group, and worked with Roland Emmerich and Dean Devlin on Stargate and Independence Day, and then kind of grew up in production to a degree, and worked as an assistant director and then I was hired at another German company called Constantine Film, and I brought them and developed a project called Resident Evil, and it went on to become a very big, successful franchise for that company, and kind of grew in that way. And then after I left that company, I started producing on my own, and I started doing very small films that I could raise money for. And about 8 years ago, I did several films independently, and then about 8 years ago, I joined ArcLight, and had a couple of projects that I had folded in that ArcLight was going to finance with me. And at the same time, Gary Hamilton, the head of ArcLight, wanted to get more into production and producing their own films, and asked me to join and help kind of get more involved in that side of it, and start developing our own projects. And I've been here now 8 years, and we very quickly, the company's focus went more towards international co-productions, and specifically Chinese co-productions. So that's been the bulk of my focus while I'm at ArcLight, and again, of the probably have a dozen projects in development, probably half of them are Chinese co-productions. Or have Chinese elements to them. So
what a journey you had.
Yeah, right, it's a great industry. It's a very tough business, but it's a great industry, and there's an enormous amount of satisfaction when you've kind of created something and you've come up with an idea, and you watch it, you nurture it into a script.
And it's like your baby.
Yeah, and then you put the creative elements on it, you put the financing together, and then to see it come to life in production and then to be released, it's an incredibly rewarding experience.
What would you say is the most challenging part of being a producer?
Honestly, I think it would be easier to list what isn't challenging about being a producer. I think everything is challenging. I mean, that side of it is incredibly rewarding. It's an incredibly rewarding business when it works, but it is, against all odds that these movies happen. Every movie is a small miracle in how they end up coming together. So, it's a challenge in finding good material that works internationally and specifically kind of organically can transcend the Asian market and the Western market. Finding those projects is hard. Developing the screenplays is another challenge. Assigning the right director and the right cast and finding those partners. All of those are challenges in making a film, and it doesn't stop until the movie is done, and even when it's done, you want to make sure it gets out into the world in the best possible way.
So when does the job of producer done at the stage of film? Is it after post?
It is. It kind of doesn't end until the movie is released. I think it's when the movie is released and even after it's released, there are things that'll pop up and little things that'll happen that you have to navigate. But it starts at the germ of an idea, and it goes all the way until you close, and until the movie is released and it's out. And there has to be some oversight to the process from the beginning to the very end.
What do you like the most about this job?
I love being on set. I love producing films. I love filmmakers. I love going to places, to a remote part of the Hubei province that I would never otherwise go to, and shooting there for weeks, or and meeting people. We shot half of Jungle in Colombia and half of it in Australia, and going to remote parts of Colombia and South America that I will never ever go to, that are the most beautiful places on earth. And that is probably, the making the film is one of my favorite parts of the process. It's so hard getting the financing together and getting the package together and all that. When I'm actually making the movie is probably my favorite part of it. You see it come to life, and you see what the actors bring to it, and you're on set, and filmmakers in general are like carnival workers. We all go to these crazy locations, and they're like a big dysfunctional family, and you travel, and everyone just don't have any other industry where everyone is kind of working towards one singular goal of realizing this vision that is the director's vision, the writer's vision, and everyone comes together to make that happen. And that's really one of the most magical parts of the process. There's a benefit to, I love the editing process, which is you're rewriting the movie, and it's the final rewrite before the movie is released to the world.
Do you normally go to the editing room, supervise?
It's largely the director and the editor, but then the producers will come in after the director has delivered his cut, and then the director will work with the producers. So with Jungle, for example, I'm going back to Australia this week. I'll spend a couple of days with the director of Jungle and in the editing suite, and then I will go. Then I go to Adelaide to finish shooting the Australian portion of Hotel Mumbai. So it's I'll be in the edit suite, and it's really another really exciting part where you see the movie, the potential of the movie, and all the different directions that it could go, and what could happen there.
Beautiful. That was a beautiful speech that you had there.
I'm glad you liked that.
And I think at the end of the show, can you say something to encourage our younger generation?
I think this is an amazing industry. It's an amazing industry. It's an incredibly rewarding business. It takes very hard work. And I think you have to look at how you can commit to this business, and it isn't giving it 1 year or 6 months or seeing what happens. You have to kind of really put your heart and soul into it and really commit to doing it. It's a great business, and in the production side of this business, hard work will always triumph. And working hard and putting in the hours and being smart about the choices you make are going to be incredibly helpful and incredibly rewarding for you. There are people that can outdress you, outthink, have more connections, have all these things, but they can't outwork you. And hard work will always be rewarded, and education will always be rewarded. I think if there's one thing I would say to people, and I had an Academy Award-winning documentarian say this to me, she said, I can always tell a film school, she can always tell one of the short film from, or film from one of the big film schools, because they're well lit and they're well crafted, but there's no story. I think one of the most important things, and for everyone that's making films, is learn how to tell a story. Study literature, study how to tell a story. The technical side of this business will always change, but learn how to be a storyteller and how to engage an audience. And if you have that, and if you can tell great stories, then you'll be a great filmmaker.
感谢您收看本周的对话好莱坞，也相信我们即将看到更多来自 ArcLight Film 的电影在中国上映。我是主持人小棒，我们下周再见。观众朋友们，大家好，欢迎收看本周的对话好莱坞，我是主持人盛棒。今天的节目呢，我们来到了专注于中澳合拍片的好莱坞电影公司 ArcLight Film， 和他的首席创意官 Mike Gabriel 先生来聊聊合拍片的未来，以及他作为制片人的心路历程。
Gio, we need to talk. It's your brother. He's missing. Luke! I will find Luke, but I need your help.
We picked up a signal.
There's a legend of a tomb built over 2,000 years ago. The Emperor had a great desire to achieve death, a secret magic.
Immortality. We're on the cusp of something no one's ever seen before.
The tomb was built with secret passages. We pushed the number 6 tile. Or you could punch it.
What's that?
Spiders. We gotta go now. Jen, you gotta wait out for us?
My God.
She likes me.
You should run now.
So just to recap, dust storm, firestorm, and deadly freaking spiders. Did I miss anything?
Hi, Mr. Gabriel, how are you doing today?
Good, how are you?
It's a beautiful office that you have here.
Thank you.
Well, as the Chief Creative Officer of ArcLight Film, what factors do you consider in terms of choosing projects to develop?
Well, we choose projects mostly driven by the marketplace. So what will work for us, the international marketplace, and more recently, in the last several years, what works in the Chinese marketplace. So we are looking for market-driven films, so commercial films that travel beyond just the United States.
So what kind of films are in trend right now for the Chinese market?
We are, for China, I mean, we're looking for, the Chinese market seems to want spectacle. They want big kind of Hollywood
style action films.
Exactly, action, sci-fi, thrillers. Those are the kind of main focus, disaster films, things that work in a kind of international commercial way. So basically we're looking for films for the international market, looking for commercial films, and we're a very market-driven company, so we like to do things that work internationally, that are accessible to as many people as possible around the globe. More recently, we have a focus on Chinese and the Asian market, the whole Southeast Asia and China, and the Chinese market seems to want a spectacle. They want big Hollywood movies, blockbuster-style movies that are done like studio-style films, but done without the studio, that are done independently. So that has been most of our focus has been on commercial fares, so action films, thrillers, sci-fi, disaster films, things like that.
Were there any films that were already in China and that you would like to share with us, or? We're finishing a movie right now with that stars Li Bingbing that we shot in Australia. That was an Australian-Chinese co-production called Nest. And we are just finishing that film now and about to lock picture and get into the visual effects and deliver that movie. So hopefully that'll come out next year. We had a film several years ago called Bait 3D that was a 3D shark film that did great business in China, did almost $30 million, and it was a very fun kind of disaster film about a tsunami hitting the Gold Coast of Australia and flooding a shopping center with a pack of tiger sharks, and it was a survival thriller action film, but it was very well received in China. Nice. So Nest will be in theater in China as well?
Yes.
What story does Nest talk about?
Nest is about poisonous Australian spiders that are discovered in China, and about a group of scientists, including Li Bingbing, that go to China to find out the mystery of how these deadly spiders from Australia got to China. And it's tied into a whole elixir and the fountain of youth, and it's an ancient emperor's tomb, and so it's kind of
different elements.
Yeah, different elements, and kind of like national treasure, kind of an Indiana Jones style creature action adventure film.
Cool. And Li Bingbing is like intellectual.
She's a scientist and
but some action as well, right?
Exactly.
It's everything together.
Yeah.
So the film was mostly done in China.
We shot mostly in Australia. It was a co-production. So we shot on stage in China, but it's shot in Australia but set in China.
Oh.
So we have done some shooting in China, but the majority of the shoot happened in Australia.
Why did you choose Australia?
Because of it's an Australian director, an Australian crew. We're an Australian company, and the infrastructure is there. So we have the stages, and we have a lot of resources available to us. And there's also, in doing a co-production between China and Australia, there are financial advantages to shooting in Australia and combining the two countries' resources, and we were very happy with the outcome.
What part of China does the story say it happens in?
That is such a good question.
Because I'm thinking Australia and China, Sichuan probably, I don't know, like forest.
Yeah, it's an underground network of tombs, so it's all most of it is submerged, so it's not the
okay, so it doesn't need to be a specific. That's cool.
But it's definitely more of an arid desert. It looks like kind of that area outside of Beijing that's close to the desert.
Nice. Yeah. So I think a lot of people think that when American production or like foreign production go into China to shoot, there are a lot of barriers. As a producer, you know so much about this. Is it true?
I think there's a cultural sensitivity that you have whenever you work with any country. I think every country has its film grammar. It has its language that it understands in film. I think that's a much bigger challenge in how that is navigated. And I think there are censorship concerns that you have to consider, but I don't think they're any different than other territories. I think if you look at what you distribute to Germany, for example, they're very sensitive to extreme violence in Germany. So things that are very violent are hard to release. In the same way, China has certain kind of peculiarities and certain issues that are of concern, and you just, for us, it's second nature. We know the areas that you want to avoid. There's no extreme violence. There's nothing too gratuitous sexually, but those are cultural sensitivities that I think every territory has, and I think the reason there's more of a light shown on China now is because it's become the most important territory in the world, and everyone is looking to China in how to collaborate with China, how films can be made for that market, and how to access that market. And it's not, for us, it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of cultural sensitivity and understanding what works in that market and what works internationally.
But logistic-wise, there's still some rules. Like, for example, I think they limit the crew number. What I heard was 8 people from foreign. 8 people in the crew with a foreign passport.
I have not experienced that. I've shot a movie in China completely, and we had a lot more than 8 people come for the crew. I did a Canadian, French, Chinese co-production a couple of years ago called Outcast that we shot in the Yunnan province. I haven't found that to be the case. Nice. I think there are rules within the co-production structure that you have to take advantage of, but I don't.
But it's not really like a big barrier or anything.
Yeah, I don't find it a barrier at all. I think it's the same types of restrictions that you would have shooting in any other co-production structure. Definitely. You have to bring, we have a Chinese composer, and we have certain crew members from Australia and certain crew members from China.
And well, obviously you just talked a lot about the Chinese market and how everyone is focusing on the market, want to collaborate, want to break into the market. But we do see kind of fall down of the market this year, if you note about it, right? We see, I think, a 35% down of box office this year so far. What do you think of this?
I think it has been growing at such a tremendous pace that you're going to have ebbs and flows of any market. I think to look at the explosion in the Chinese market over the last decade, it's inevitable that there are going to be kind of
up and down.
There are going to be ups and downs in any construct, and I think China still we haven't seen it reach its full potential. So I think a dip and a change in, I feel like every year there's a change in the sensibility and what works in China and what the Chinese audience is interested in. And while it's an unpredictable market in a lot of ways creatively, you can see their taste and sophistication of Chinese films, of international co-productions growing and growing and growing.
So you're still optimistic and positive about the Chinese market?
I think it's the future. I mean, if you look at our slate, I would say 50 to 60% of the films that I have in development now have a Chinese component to them or are official Chinese co-productions.
Nice. What other films are you developing now?
Well, we're finishing 3 movies right now. So we're finishing Nest, which is the Li Bingbing film. I'm finishing a film called Jungle that stars Daniel Radcliffe, and I'm heading back down to Australia. We're in production on a film called Hotel Mumbai, that's about the terror attacks on the Taj Hotel in Mumbai in 2008. So those are the films that we have in production.
What's the story of Jungle?
Jungle is a true story of a man named Yossi Ginsberg that went on an adventure to South America, went to Bolivia on a backpacking adventure, was seduced and led into the Bolivian, the Amazon by a guide, and you see the relationship between his friends change, and he survives for a number of days, for several days by himself in the jungle. And it's a survival story about how he survived and the kind of spiritual journey that he goes on, and it's directed by Greg McLean, and it's a very harrowing kind of survival thriller about this character's survival in the jungle and how he gets out.
Sounds very exciting.
Yeah, it's an exciting film. It's a fantastic film.
And you do plan to kind of bring this one to the Chinese market as well?
We would hope it is exactly as brought to the Chinese market. We have several projects in development. Some of them are still under wraps, but they are working with some fantastic actors and talent. Some of them are period action films that I can't get into too much detail because it's still confidential, and another survival thriller that involves another kind of creature type disaster film that we're very excited about.
Big films. They're
big
all
films.
big films.
They are big films. Yeah, we don't, the market in China, we don't try to compete with local language smaller films. We're trying to make Hollywood films that the studios aren't making. So kind of those mid-range action and sci-fi films.
Would you consider online distribution if it doesn't make in theater? Because we know that there are like 25 movies that can go in, unless it's, well, of course, U.S.-China co-production or co-production.
We don't do U.S.-China co-production because we're an Australian company.
Sorry, yeah.
So we don't fall into the quota. So we don't make films that go into the quota. We make films that qualify as Chinese films. So
That's smart.
So Bait. Bait was released as a Chinese film. It qualified as a Chinese film, for example. Nest is a Chinese-Australian co-production, so it doesn't fall into the same restrictions.
Oh, very smart. So would you ever consider online distribution? It's such a big thing in China right now. A lot of films are only doing online distribution and get pretty nice outcome and profit.
I think we would look at every option available. I know that is a very fast-growing segment of the marketplace, and we've met with. Last time I was in Beijing, we met with Alibaba. We've met with a lot of the bigger kind of online players in China. It is, for us, still the Chinese box office is the mainstay. So I'm sure that'll be explored, and I think that's the future of the market that we haven't seen tapped. In the way that the United States in the independent space, it's all about the ancillary marketplace, which is everything outside of theatrical distribution. You're going to see when that emerges in China, which is starting with this online options, I mean, it's going to be the next kind of game changer, I think, in that marketplace.